Welcome to the Escape the System channel. I'm Joe Barnes, author of the books The Rebel Code and Escape the System. And in today's video, I'm going to be ranking self-help gurus. I've got 11 listed below. Now, obviously, this isn't every self-help guru that is out there or that exists. These are the self-help gurus that I have interacted with or that I follow. When I say interacted with, 2 of them I've met in person or heard them speak in person. The rest I might follow online through their various different mediums. Most are authors, most have books out, but some also have courses out, some have podcasts out, some do seminars and talks. So there's a wide variety of ways in which they reach an audience, and I thought it would be useful to rate each one of them accordingly so you guys have a good idea of who you should follow out there and who maybe is best to avoid. Although at the end of the day, you should do your own thinking and make your own decisions. But this is my input on these 11 self-help gurus. So these people are listed in alphabetical order. So we'll start with Brené Brown, and I will give her a B. And the reason for that is, of all the people in this list, I've probably interacted with her content the least. Actually, she's only on the list really because I watched a Netflix documentary with her, or a Netflix talk with her. My girlfriend happened to be watching it. I was pretty impressed with what she had to say. Daring to be Great is one of her books, and The Gifts of Imperfection. She talks a lot about vulnerability, and I think it's a good message. I enjoyed her message. If I was engaged with her work a little bit more, she might go up that rating from a B to an A. I couldn't see much wrong with what she was saying. She's also a professor, I think, at perhaps the University of Texas. I think that's how her work started. I'm guessing a professor in psychology. She certainly speaks on psychological issues. And I find her to be a pretty good source of information and knowledge and a different perspective or way of looking at things. Then we move on to Joe Dispenza. Now, he actually ranks quite highly on my list. I like a lot of what Joe Dispenza has to say. I've read his book, Becoming Supernatural. You can check out my other video, which is a tier rating list for the best self-help books of all time. I've got a part 1 and a part 2, and I think Joe is on one of those lists with his book, Becoming Supernatural, which I'm a fan of, but he takes, to my mind, an overly scientific approach. Now, we all want a little bit of science in what we're learning to back up our claims, but I think he almost goes overboard. But in terms of him being a self-help guru, I think this is to his credit, because he takes a position where he wants to prove what he says. A lot of what he talks is about the law of attraction. And you can get various law of attraction experts out there. I think the newest one here in the UK I've heard of is Roxy Nafosi. And I don't think she would go into the same scientific detail that Joe Dispenza does in an attempt to prove what he's saying, or at least show you that there's some backing behind this idea of the law of attraction. For that, he's to be credited. He also seems to run some very powerful or interesting retreats where you can go away and learn and experience firsthand all of the things he writes about in his book. Those seem to be genuine. They seem to be beneficial to the people they go. The impression I get with Joe Dispenza is he's trying to do good work. Of course, everyone wants to make money, but he doesn't just seem to be about making money. He genuinely seems to be wanting to make a difference with his work. And the content he talks about, the interviews I've seen him on, have all been good stuff. So I'd put him right close to the top in the A category. So then we move on to Tim Ferriss. Tim I'd put in the B category, known mainly for his books, The 4-Hour Work Week, The 4-Hour Body, and I think The 4-Hour Cook or Chef, something along those lines, and his podcast. He's probably more known for his podcast now, which I find pretty enjoyable. Interesting guests, interesting subjects, sharing useful information. If there's one criticism I have of Tim Ferriss, he's slightly, to my mind, technologically obsessed. He's always selling these what could be gimmicky products at the start of his podcast. Okay, it's no problem to have sponsors. And of course, as a podcast host, your main aim is to have a sponsorship for the channel and start making money with it that way. I completely get that. But he's always promoting these something greens or vitamins or a special pillow to lie your head on. It's just, to me, it could work, but I think probably they're more than likely they're just gimmicks that he's selling, and he seems to place a great deal of authority in these kinds of products. So maybe he actually truly believes in them, but my problem with that is that I don't think they make that much difference. I think it's always the power truly is in your mind, and that's where it all lies, and you can't really sell that apart from learning how to use it and teaching people how to get the best out of themselves in that respect. But it's much easier to sell a product, and for that reason I mark him down a little bit. Also, his 4-hour work week is what he is known for initially. That's what broke him into the self-help mainstream and gave him that guru status. And his book, although I haven't read it completely from cover to cover, and the bits that I did read I enjoyed, it's more the concept I have a slight problem with. He doesn't live a 4-hour work week. Nobody really does. He's selling you a dream which is probably slightly unachievable. Again, a gimmick to get your attention, to get you to buy the book. But from what I read of the book, the content was pretty good. And the content on his podcast, again, is pretty good. So I'm going to leave him in that B category. Moving on to David Goggins. Again, I'll go with B. There's some of the stuff I like a lot about David Goggins that would make me put him in the A category. I love his talking when he's on podcasts, very motivational. He's got an excellent book, Can't Hurt Me. So it's all pretty good. The only thing that knocks him down a bit, I feel, is his message is a little bit one-dimensional. I know he puts some people off because he's so hardcore. That doesn't really put me off. I quite like that approach. It's quite refreshing to have somebody be that intense. But it's always pretty much the same message again and again. Just push yourself, basically. Let's fucking get it, is what he's sort of saying. And he's trying to get you. He's often on his Instagram or YouTube, whatever it is. He camera videos of himself running, and he stops to bark a few commands at you to motivate you. And it's quite motivating stuff. But ultimately, to reach that higher echelon, I feel he has to be a little more. There have to be a little more facets to his game than just that. Then we'll go on to someone who I do feel has a lot of facets to his game and is sharing some brilliant information, and that is Robert Greene. So most known for his breakout book, The 48 Laws of Power. He also has a YouTube channel. I think it's called Robert Greene. It has over 1 million followers. He shares some great content on there. You'll also see him doing the rounds on the podcast shows. Again, very interesting person to listen to. Very knowledgeable. Slightly academic, but not in a bad way, in a way that adds to his knowledge and the richness of the examples he can use. Excellent content. It's funny, for somebody who appears or is criticized of being Machiavellian in his book, he actually seems like a very genuine, knowledgeable, and caring about his listeners and readers, unlike some of the other people who are going to come up on this list that seem to be all about themselves and all about making as much money as they possibly can. Robert Greene genuinely seems to want to enhance our knowledge and to help his readers and his listeners, his viewers, to empower themselves. So that's kind of ironic that he has that tag of being Machiavellian, yet I think he's possibly one of the most genuine on this list. Okay, so as we continue our tier list, we now move on to Vex King. And I don't know how well audiences outside of the UK know him. He has got a lot of Instagram followers, 1.8 million. So he's probably one of the lesser well-known self-help gurus on this list. I only really include him because I have actually met him. If you go on my Instagram, you'll see a photo with me and him together at the Hay House Writers Workshop last year. He came up and did a talk. He is a Hay House author. He's known for his Instagram profile, as I mentioned, but also his book. I can't remember the title off the top of my head,
Good vibes, good life. I think that's what it is. So I listened to him speak, and I was quite impressed, not impressed in the sense that he had something profound to say, more in the sense that he was quite interesting and he was more genuine than I actually thought he was. I thought he was just another guy looking for fame, social media guy looking for fame, but I got the impression maybe not. I give him a B because I don't think he has anything particularly groundbreaking to say. Good Vibes, Good Life is about the law of attraction. He seemed mainly to speak about the law of attraction, although I think maybe his newer books and material is focused more on relationships. He had a very interesting backstory in that he had some very strange and unique spiritual encounters when he was younger. And that was quite interesting. He was quite a quiet, soft-spoken, humble guy as well. So that again made me think perhaps he is genuine in what he does. However, there's nothing new in what he's doing. In fact, funnily enough, I mentioned I was at the Hay House Writers Workshop when he gave the talk, and he's obviously a Hay House author. But he mentioned that when he first approached Hay House, they rejected him. So the strength of his script or his book alone clearly didn't stand out to them. However, when Hay House, somebody at Hay House then found out that he had this huge following on Instagram, they were falling over themselves to sign him and apologize. Oh, they were so sorry. His material was brilliant. Oh, they wanted him all along. Of course, they didn't think that. They just saw that he had a lot of followers on Instagram and thought, wow, this is a market we can take advantage of. Let's publish this guy's book and capitalize on the fact that he already has an inbuilt audience. Moving on to Paul McKenna, someone else I've actually met in person. Again, if you go on my Instagram, you'll see me with a picture of Paul McKenna, again, UK based. I don't know how well US audiences will know him, but here in the UK, he came to fame as a stage hypnotist, actually in the 90s. And then he sort of parlayed that over more into the therapy side of hypnotism or hypnotherapy and NLP as well. He's partnered up with one of the founders of NLP. They run training sessions and courses together. He's also got a whole host of books. You probably can't see them behind me because I'm blocking it, but a whole host of hypnotherapy books. I can make you thin. I can make you sleep. I can make you stop smoking. Paul McKenna strikes me after seeing him or seeing his approach as a guy who is all about the money, who is all about the fame. However, he has got charisma and he does it in a way which you can kind of forgive him for doing it. Yeah, well, and also the point, there's nothing wrong with wanting to have lots of money. Maybe to a lesser degree, maybe there is something a little bit wrong if you're desperate to be famous, but there's nothing really wrong with wanting your message to get out there. With Paul McKenna, I get the impression that he wanted to be famous, and I think he even alludes to that in an interview he did with the Sunday Times years and years ago, that when he was a child he just knew he was going to be famous somehow, is what he was quoted as saying. He wanted to be the next James Bond. I think he's not somebody who is, really engaged in self-help material, in spirituality, in really finding out about what creates human change. I think he's someone who wants to be famous, and it just so happens that stage hypnotism and now NLP and self-help work is the vehicle for doing so. He found his little niche. Having said that, his books are okay. They're pretty decent. He does have charisma. I've seen him on stage. The material he covers is fairly good. Again, nothing really groundbreaking. I've seen other far less known hypnotherapists on stage with far better content than him, but I'm going to keep him in the B category because I think he's quite likable, and that counts for something. Moving on to Jordan Peterson. Again, I'm going to go with B category. Now, this is because Peterson, as I talked about in my video when I tier list ranked the best self-help books, he's at extremes. He has some fascinating insights and fascinating points of view. He also has some terrible points of view, some really harmful points of view that people following his work shouldn't take too seriously. he constantly talks about in his first book, 12 Rules for Life, that life is suffering. Life is suffering. And if you go around believing that, you're going to view everything, you're going to find evidence in your life to confirm that belief. You're going to start to see the world from this perspective, and it's not going to help your life. Yes, there are elements of suffering in life, but that doesn't mean the entire experience of life is suffering. This is just one of the terrible things he writes about and talks about. But there's lots of good stuff as well. Taking responsibility for yourself is one of his strong messages. And there are many other things that he talks about that are fascinating and very thought-provoking. Also, I don't think he's one of these guys who is desperate for fame. And I don't think he's one of these guys who is just in it for himself. I think he is genuinely trying to make a difference to the world. It's just that some of his points of view, to me, are more harmful than helpful. But then, having said that, there's a lot of good that he talks about and writes about as well. So he can stay in the B category. Then going on to Tony Robbins. Now, I'm going to place Tony in the A category. I've always, since I've come across his work, I've always wanted to find something to bring him down, to criticize him on, but I just can't seem to do it. My senses, my spider senses, my intuition smell that something's slightly off with Tony. Something's not quite right. But yet, on investigating him, on speaking to people who've been to his seminars, I can never find out what that actually is. Maybe it's just simply the fact that he's created this persona, this Tony Robbins person, that you get this feeling that the real person is slightly detached from the image. That's the impression I get, that he's spent so many decades being this Tony Robbins character that it's almost not a real person. Having said that, he is probably the number one self-help guru on the planet and has been for decades. His Unleash the Power Within and other events that he runs are incredibly popular. He's got his books out. He used to sell those CDs and cassette tapes that you could listen to in your car. I bought them. I enjoyed them. I thought they were good. Never read any of his books. I've consumed quite a lot of his content online, free content. I watched his I'm Not Your Guru Netflix show, which I found fascinating. I've never been to one of his events, but I might. Certainly all the people I know in the self-help space in London, plenty of them have been, and I haven't heard a bad word about one of his events. People describe them as life-changing. People who I wouldn't have thought would necessarily go to one. People who I don't consider as gullible, people who I have a lot of respect for, go to his events and say that this event changed my life. It gave me a new perspective. It's the reason I've now launched my business to the next level. So for these reasons, I'm going to give Tony an A. I do like his content. I think it's good. I'm amazed by his ability to pick somebody out of the audience and go through their issue and seem to help them or change their life in 10 minutes and just know exactly what to say to them. That, to me, is a very impressive skill. Moving on to somebody who I'm not impressed with. This guy, this creep, Shetty, goes down in the C category. And you may wonder why I'm not placing anybody in the S or the D category. And that's because with the books I did the tier list on, I know those books inside out. I feel comfortable to rate them as the greatest of all time or a book that completely sucks. Here, I'm not quite as, my knowledge is not quite as in depth as it is with the books. So I'm not going to place anyone in the greatest of all time. I'm not going to place anyone in the D category because I could be a little bit wrong about all of these ratings. But Shetty, definitely, as I said, he seems like a creep. I know a lot of people like him and look at him smiling there in the photo. He seems so approachable and likable. But his whole premise and story, and I will include a link to an article which basically exposes his whole backstory. He came out with this book, Think Like a Monk. Apparently, he spent 2 years or so with monks in India and was so devout and had such a humbling, life-changing experience. Well, apparently his girlfriend says that he never really spent more than a few weeks at a time in this ashram in India, spent most of those 2 years in the UK, and basically just packaged it into a gimmick that he tried to sell. I mean, why are people interested in thinking like a monk anyway? I don't really get the appeal of it, but he suckered a lot of people. And then apparently a lot of his social media posts and the stuff he puts online is just copied quotes from other people. He ripped them off and didn't even attribute them to those people. He subsequently, after being busted for that, he took a load of this content down, so you probably aren't going to go and see that. But as I said, I'll leave a link to an article in the description so that you can research this for yourself. It seems he's a bit of a fraud. And also, why would he move to Hollywood? Why would this ultra spiritual guy, this guru, who's so out for helping everybody else, none of it's about him, it's just about helping and uplifting others. Why would you move to Hollywood? Doesn't really make a lot of sense. Hollywood is partly for the superficial, mainly for the materialistic people, yet he's gone there to further his career. He does podcast interviews with guests, and again comes across so nice and approachable. I'm sure he's actually not a bad guy. I'm sure he is quite a nice guy. But what is apparent to me is he's desperate for fame. He's desperate for money. And that is what is important to him, not the message he speaks. He doesn't even really seem to have a message. The message seems to be copying from other people and using whatever gimmick he can get to get himself out into the world. So we then move on to our final one, Andrew Tate. Now, he's quite different to Jay Shetty, but he's going to go in that same category, the C category. What I like about Andrew Tate, he's kind of the antithesis of Jay Shetty. He's not trying to be nice. He is an arsehole, or he comes across as an arsehole and a not very likable person. So there's no front with Andrew Tate. He is what he is. I just think that, number one, he's not particularly likable. Number two, the way he went about making his money and the way he advises people to make money is verging on unethical. He's also facing criminal charges. I have no idea whether those are trumped up charges or whether they're genuine, so I'm not going to comment on those. But I will comment on the fact that he made his initial millions in the webcam business and even brags about ripping people off. That's not a guy you want to follow. You know, if you're a guru, a self-help guru, you have to have the best intentions of uplifting other people. And yes, he says he's freeing people from the matrix, which aligns with my message of escaping the system. And I do agree with some of the stuff he says. I just don't like his approach. I find him unlikable, a bit arrogant. And I also think his message is not great either, because he's telling people to escape the matrix. Great. But yet he's all about materialism, taking pictures with his Bugattis, showing you how much money he's got. If you buy into materialism, you buy into the matrix. So that's one part in which his message is really flawed. The other part is you can watch criticisms of his War Room or his Hustlers University out there. I try and leave a link to a video exposing that and how it's just really a pyramid scheme, a way to make him money rather than sharing any genuine life-changing content with the people that subscribe to his memberships. So there you go. There are my lists. Those are the three people I feel, if you want my opinion on who you should listen to in the self-help space, it's Joe Dispenza, Robert Greene, and Tony Robbins, with an honorable mention to Brené Brown and Tim Ferriss and David Goggins. The other three, if I had a category between B and C, that's where I put Vex King, McKenna, and Peterson. And those two at the bottom, Jay Shetty, Andrew Tate, I may well put them in actually I put Shetty below Andrew Tate if I felt that I was more versed with all of their material. So that's my final analysis. I hope you've enjoyed it. Listen, if you disagree with it, make a comment below. Tell me how you would change that order. Also, before I go, don't forget to check out my books. We've got the Rebel Code and Escape the System behind me. I'll leave links to those. and stay tuned for the next video. See you then.